No, it is not 2016. You are not suffering from the Mandela effect. It is John Lorden here with a brand new episode of BrainScratch, but I decided to run the old intro because we're doing things a little more old school for BrainScratch. Today we are doing a fringe episode. We are going to go hunting aliens with a former guitarist from Blink-182. Never thought I would say something like that on this channel, but that's exactly what we're going to do. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you guys being here. So this is a topic that, believe it or not, I've been looking at kind of for a couple years. There's some footage that kicked out of pilots that saw strange aircraft appearing on their screens, and they reacted to it in ways that would make you think they were pretty surprised to see what they were seeing. The footage originally kicked out, I think, in 2017, if I recall correctly, and I considered doing an episode about it back then. But when I started looking into the organization that was releasing the footage, I was really put off, mainly because it seemed like there was a very big marketing push going on at that time to try to get investors, and the marketing push isn't there anymore, but all the links of it are still there all over the website and all that. It seemed to me like someone was trying to grab up a bunch of money, and I don't know if I really appreciate the approach that that company is taking, but there's been some developments with these videos. So a few weeks ago, I was on kind of an informal episode of Crawl Space over on Get Vocal. Tim and Lance were talking, and I just kind of jumped on, and Tim started asking about, hey, did you guys see that footage, and what did you think about it? And we had a pretty interesting conversation. You can see Morph actually jumped in on it as well. And I thought, I was telling them, I never could really figure out a good approach for what do I do with this topic? Where do I take this topic? And how do you prove or disprove something like, it's footage from military aircraft. I'm certainly no expert in that. But after looking through things for a while, I think I've got some interesting questions, and I think I've got some questions that I'm not seeing pop up in a whole lot of other places. So I want to have a conversation with you guys, just like we did on the old school brain scratches, and see if we could just look at this topic together, talk about some of the possibilities, and then I'm really going to turn it over to you to talk in the comments down below and let me know your thoughts, and maybe we'll have to do a follow-up if you guys have some interesting ideas in terms of other things that could be happening with this that we could actually learn from and dive into further. So let's get started. Now that I've given you a rambling start to this story, over at the New York Times, this is an article from December 2017. The title is Glowing Auras and Black Money, the Pentagon's Mysterious UFO Program. And believe it or not, there's already a problem that I have with this story just in the title. We're going to talk more about that as the video goes on here. Here's a clip of one of the videos. We are going to watch the videos, but I'm going to wait till a little bit later. There's 3 videos. Honestly, one of them is not super compelling to me. The other one I had an initial reaction about that I'm still wondering if might be a possibility. This one that they're showing here, this is certainly the most interesting of the 3, but we will watch them all. In the $600 billion annual Defense Department budgets, the $22 million spent on the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program was almost impossible to find, which was how the Pentagon wanted it. For years, the program investigated reports of unidentified flying objects, according to Defense Department officials, interviews with program participants, and records obtained by the New York Times. It was run by a military intelligence official, Luis Elizondo, on the 5th floor of the Pentagon Sea Ring, deep within the building's maze. So let me just call out, and of course this is information that is coming after this was all released. Some people are really questioning if Luis Elizondo was truly running this organization. There's really no doubt that he actually did work in the Defense Department in some way, but people are having trouble verifying. And of course, if this is an organization that's really that undercover, you might have trouble verifying that type of information, except in this case, we have Luis, who is basically left the organization. He's now joined a private organization where he's promoting this information. They're the ones that release these videos. And it seems like for some interviews, he's willing to be there. For other, sometimes larger interviews, he's not willing to answer questions. Seems like he might be a little selective. I don't know what the criteria for that selection is. Some people are theorizing that maybe, he's talking to certain publications because he knows that they have a similar mindset, or there's some type of believability factor that they share, something along those lines. Just a little word of caution. At this point, I think it seems like there's a TV show now that he's being featured on regularly that's actually produced by the same company that released these videos. It's another one of those things that just gives me a little concern, because I'm like, okay, what is your intent here, guys? It's one thing if you're telling me that you're really trying to focus money into research and really trying to figure out if we're being visited by life outside of Earth. It's another thing if you're talking about selling a TV show to the History Channel, just kind of in my eyes. But let's continue here. The Defense Department has never before acknowledged the existence of the program, which it says it shut down in 2012. Well, it's interesting. I guess they never before acknowledged it, but when they did, they said, oh, by the way, we had something like that, but we shut it down. Its backers say that while the Pentagon ended funding for the effort at that time, the program remains in existence. Once again, I wouldn't have a problem believing that. And let me also just put on the table, I am extremely open-minded to the possibility. I think it's very, very highly unlikely that we are the only signs of life in this universe. I just, the universe seems to be, and of course I haven't seen it for myself, but it seems to be an extremely vast place where there's a lot of unknowns for us. And it seems like a very human perspective to think, no, we're the only ones that are around here. We're the only thing that matters. I mean, if you look at the history of what we do on this planet to each other, I think that would pretty much support that a lot of us have that perspective. So one of the videos is being described here, and it mentions a whitish oval object about the size of a commercial plane chased by two Navy F-8 18F fighter jets from the aircraft carrier Nimitz off the coast of San Diego in 2004. Now, I told you I had a little problem with the title here. Let me tell you what that was about. Glowing auras. The big problem I'm having with this footage is it's not coming from a traditional camera. This is not a camera that is like on your phone. This is not something even higher end like a television camera or something like that. This is a military device, and we're going to dive in. We're not going to go too deep because I don't want to lose you guys, but we're going to learn a little bit about the technology that this camera is using, and one of those is infrared technology. I'm pretty familiar with infrared images just from doing the work that I do here on the channel. They're used frequently, particularly for missing persons searches. And I can tell you that I've seen a lot of images where it looks like there are glowing auras. That doesn't mean that there is actually a glowing aura. Like if you looked at it with your eyes, you would see, oh my, good, look at that. It looks like an angel. It wouldn't look like that to your eyes. But through the infrared camera, it does, because there's heat emitting from the object and going outward. So that's one of those things where there's a very simple assumption that keeps happening with this footage, that you're looking at footage from a camera. And it's interesting because the company that does release this stuff, which by the way, there's a bit of a question if they actually released it under proper pretense or not. They kind of claimed that it was cleared for release, and some of the articles I'm seeing are saying, no, it wasn't necessarily cleared. But they're very clear at the start of their version of the video that this is a very specific type of camera. So we're going to learn more about it. But back to that point, here it's talking about a whitish oval object. The infrared camera basically has two modes, where it's either in white mode or it's in black mode. And in white mode, it's showing you the heat signature as white. If you look at this footage, I'm pretty sure you'll agree with me, it's not in color. This is black and white footage. So depending on if they're in white mode or black mode, you're going to see that object and it will completely flip color. It'll go to a black object or it'll be a white object. So that's one of the things. There's just this kind of very simple assumption with some of the analysis I'm seeing about this footage that they're taking the color at face value. They're taking the aura at face value. And this isn't camera footage. This is information that's being relayed through several different types of sensors to a screen. And it's being relayed to the screen in a way that these pilots can act on it. That's quite a bit different than I walked outside, I pointed my camera up at the sky, and I saw, a bright white thing shaped like a tic tac that had an aura around it. Sarah Seeger, an astrophysicist at MIT, cautioned that not knowing the origin of an object does not mean that it is from another planet or galaxy. That was kind of one point that I brought up with Tim and Lance when we were talking about this, that let's take this at face value. They're identifying something that's flying. They're not sure what that object is. There's still a jump going from that to, I think there is a little green man that's sitting in a cockpit there that is from a different planet. And I think that's exactly what Sarah Seeger is pointing out here as well. When people claim to observe truly unusual phenomena, sometimes it's worth investigating seriously, she said. But, she added, what people sometimes don't get about science is that we often have phenomena that remain unexplained. And that's just kind of a tough general truth about all this kind of stuff. Whenever you're looking into UFOs or pictures of ghosts and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot of phenomena that happens to us that we can't explain. And I have very specific events in my life. Once again, I spoke about those a little bit with Tim and Lance that I still to this day cannot explain. I just can't explain them. They're very bizarre freak occurrences. Either something really unique was happening in the environment around me, or something odd was going on with my perception or my senses. There's things that sometimes we can't find the answer for. But what I'm most excited about in terms of this footage is, a lot of the UFO stories that we've covered here on the channel have boiled down to Travis Walton saying he was taken aboard an aircraft and, tested on and all that stuff done to him. And then he was brought back days later, and all that information didn't come out until he worked with a hypnotherapist. Or Betty and Barney Hill, who have this story of being abducted. The stories of a lot of these UFO encounters seem to tie back to a person's personal accounts. And kind of thankfully, from my perspective, for the first time, there's a little bit of an interaction of people, because 2 of these videos have the audio of the pilots that you can hear, but we can actually see something for ourselves. And that's why I think it's so important to consider that, we need to understand the lens that we're capturing these images through so we can really understand what we're looking at. But thankfully, there is something that we can look at and really analyze, and it's from modern technology. We're not looking at a photo from 1940 that is all busted up and someone has done some digital retouching on, and of course that would introduce a bunch of possible variables. Here's a picture of Luis Elizondo. And I'm not going to dive too much into him. There's just some speculation about, what's kind of his motivating factors and about the people that are supporting his efforts. Footage, now we're talking about another clip, footage from a Navy FA-18 Super Hornet showing an aircraft surrounded by some kind of glowing aura traveling at high speed and rotating as it moves. The Navy pilots can be heard trying to understand what they are seeing. There's a whole fleet of them, one exclaims. Defense officials declined to release the location and the date of the incident. This paragraph, once again, I'm very surprised that this is coming from the New York Times. There's a couple of assumptions that are going on just in this section that I read you. Once again, we have the glowing aura, which I've already touched on. We won't do it again. But there's a whole fleet of them. If you listen to the dialogue for yourself, the pilots are actually assuming that what they're seeing is a drone. And he says that to his co-pilot, and the co-pilot responds, there's a whole fleet of them. Check the essay. I'm not sure what the essay is, but so this term, there's a whole fleet of them. They're not talking about UFOs. Well, I guess they might be. They don't know what the object is that they're looking at, but their assumption initially is what they're looking at is a drone. One thing that really kind of sucks about that video clip is it ends precisely when things are getting very interesting. The pilot is literally heading in that direction, is supposedly about a half mile away. The object does something very unique in terms of its maneuver, and then the video ends. Why? I don't know. And it's interesting because there's kind of a new opportunity with these videos, and That's one of the biggest questions for me in the videos, and unfortunately this new opportunity has not answered any of that. So the organization that ultimately winds up releasing these videos is To the Stars Academy, and this is Tom DeLonge, who is the former guitarist for Blink-182, currently in the band Angels and Airwaves, I believe. And just on a little bit of a personal note, he's one of the few reasons I've ever had to leave a concert. I was severely disappointed. He plays the guitar fine. The singing wasn't so great. And maybe it was just an off night. I don't know. But he has started this organization, To the Stars Academy, and it's really weird because it's lumping in kind of another company that he had, and he's trying to write books, and he's really got this angle about making sure that this is kind of like a scientific research company, but also an entertainment company. And if you look at some of his other materials, of course, he's really pushing big on the entertainment front. I've heard his band members talk about the fact that, they'd be on a tour bus with him and he's literally watching out the window telling them, hey, do you see that? That thing's following us. And he was just talking their ears off about UFOs while they were on tour. So obviously something he's very passionate about. It's just strange because the thing that really put me off when this information first came out was if you just go to their website and go to the very first page that loads on it, big button, become an investor, just right off the bat. Of course, they have watch video. They've got more about their team and all that kind of stuff. It appears like their investment strategy, I don't know if it's working great. Some of the reports I'm seeing is that they were looking to raise a huge amount of money and they've raised just a small percentage of what they were looking to raise. The Wikipedia is an interesting read. We won't go through the whole thing, but To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, often shortened to just To the Stars or TTSA, is a company co-founded by Tom DeLonge, guitarist of Blink-182 and Angels and Airwaves, Harold E. Putoff, hope I'm saying that right, probably not, and Jim Semivan. The company is composed of aerospace, science, and entertainment divisions. Just kind of an interesting mix. Just slapping the entertainment thing in there. I don't know how you could avoid it when you have someone like Tom being involved with it, but all right. So moving on to a website I don't think I've ever used as a source on the channel here before, the Black Vault. They write an article in September of 2019 because something pretty interesting happens. We have the TTSA organization put out these videos in 2017 and kind of start their fundraising campaign. And it gets some attention. Some big publications write about this, but then things just kind of go quiet. However, in 2019, there's a little bit of a development. The Navy designates the objects contained in these videos as unidentified aerial phenomena, said Joseph Gradisher, official spokesperson for the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Information Warfare. Information warfare. Interesting title. When asked why the phrase UAP is now utilized by the U.S. Navy and not UFO, Mr. Gradisher added, the unidentified aerial phenomena terminology is used because it provides the basic descriptor for the sightings, observations of unauthorized, unidentified aircraft or objects that have been observed entering, operating in the airspace of various military-controlled training ranges. I find it interesting that that's a quote from him because it sounds like he's reading from a book or something. It sounds like that's been a very well put together statement. However, the Navy also asserts that the 3 videos were never cleared for public release, which is interesting because TTSA does claim at the beginning of each of the videos that it was actually cleared. Thus confirming the official stance of the Pentagon originally issued in the Black Vault back in May of 2019 and contradicting TTSA's widespread claims the U.S. government declassified the footage for public consumption. The videos were never officially released to the general public by the DoD and should still be withheld, said Pentagon spokesperson Susan Go to the Black Vault earlier this year. Mr. Gradisher, on behalf of the Navy, confirms the Pentagon's position this week by adding the Navy has not released the videos to the general public. But in making these statements, he has essentially confirmed the existence of the videos. So at this point, we have the press kind of start sweeping up around this story again. Wow, we have an official that has now kind of confirmed the existence and the validity of these videos. Interesting side note here, there is an email that you can see from Luis Elizondo to someone. It looks official. I have to say it's pretty easy to fake an email. But to me, it kind of does look legit. It seems like it's about those videos in particular, but it's interesting because the language about the videos that's happening here is not talking about them having anything to do with like what we would consider a true UFO. There's kind of this assumption that it's an unmanned aerial vehicle, that they are dealing with the possibility of balloons, private drones, quadcopters, kind of things of that nature. And I don't know, he says that his official reason for quitting that job is because he was getting pushback on the UFO stuff, and it seems like maybe there was some type of potential cover-up of that information that he just didn't want to be a part of. So he's saying that's why he left. The context of this email, it looks like military business. It looks like legit military business. I'm not seeing any kind of indicators there of something that I would consider outside of the scope of what their normal concerns should be, something flying around in their airspace. So the Washington Post around this same time actually picks up the story from Black Vault also. Black Vault's founder, John Greenwald Jr., told the Washington Post that he believed the remarks were significant because, for the first time, the Navy acknowledged the existence of the objects in the videos on the record and admitted that the department cannot identify them. Because of this revelation, Gradisher's comments to Black Vault have ricocheted across the internet this week, getting picked up everywhere from Popular Mechanics to the front page of the Drudge Report. The most powerful military doesn't know what these objects are, Greenwald said. That doesn't mean aliens or that they don't have some plausible, logical explanation, but admitting that they see things in the sky and they can't identify them, that to me is the most amazing part of this. Just a thought I have when I'm reading a statement like that. We don't have a normal expectation. I'm not working in this job where I'm seeing regular reports from pilots and I can say that this is really, truly all that abnormal. So that's just another thing. As the public, how do we set an expectation of what is normal? What's a normal type of maybe what you would consider a freaky occurrence to happen while you're out there flying around? Is it completely uncommon for pilots to see things and not understand what those things are? I don't know. We don't have a great baseline. In a subsequent interview with the Post, Gradisher downplayed the significance of the moniker, saying that unidentified aerial phenomena was not a new term and that the Navy preferred to use it to the more popular UFO because the latter comes with cultural stigma that might discourage pilots from reporting such incidents for fear of being labeled, well, kooky. I think it's a good point. And I think it kind of moves the conversation into a different place. When we hear the term UFO, it's hard to not think spacemen, I mean, at least for me personally. So kind of changing the moniker, especially because we're talking about military terminology. We're talking about something that they might see an enemy fighter and not know that that's what it is originally. And do you want them really going over, talking back to their command saying, hey, I've got a UFO coming out on the left. I think it makes sense to really use different terminology on that for them in particular. So what happens? Well, April 27th, now that we've had kind of it's weird because it's kind of an official confirmation, but it's still not officially released. Well, in April of this year, things change. I have a little theory why things changed this year, but let's go ahead and read a release from defense.gov. The Department of Defense has authorized the release of 3 unclassified Navy videos, one taken in November 2004 and the other 2 in January 2015, which have been circulating in the public domain after unauthorized releases in 2007 and 2017. So it's pretty clear there. They're saying, yes, these are real videos. Yes, they do come from the U.S. Navy. The U.S. Navy previously acknowledged that these videos circulating in the public domain were indeed Navy videos. After a thorough review, the department has determined that the authorized release of these classified videos does not reveal any sensitive capabilities or systems and does not impinge on any subsequent investigations of military airspace incursions by unidentified aerial phenomena. UAP, there it is again. Something interesting in my mind happens with that statement in particular. I suppose one theory that you can kick out about these videos is that you're seeing some type of experimental aircraft. If that was something that the Department of Defense was able to verify, do you think that they would be okay releasing this video or even acknowledging that this is an official video? So in one way, I can see that kind of wiping away the possibility that this, they just happened to see some other experimental aircraft situation that was going on. Of course, the flip side of that is, what if it is experimental aircraft, but they know that the footage quality is so bad that there's nothing that you could really determine about it, that there's nothing helpful that our enemies could glean from, reviewing that footage. But it's really leading me more to kind of the first assumption, that it's not something that they're aware of. Hey, we had a new special type of fighter that we were testing and you guys happened to catch it on camera. DoD is releasing the videos in order to clear up any misconceptions by the public on whether or not the footage that has been circulating was real or whether or not there is more to the videos. Once again, just an interesting approach. I think I'm so used to, when I look at these stories, the presumption that the government is not going to acknowledge and fall into that deny, deny, deny. And here, it's a really interesting step. We kind of have them saying, no, look, you guys have been looking at this thing saying it's weird. We're telling you, yeah, it's real. And that's that. You guys can run off and theorize about it. The aerial phenomena observed in the video remains characterized as unidentified. So they're kind of even saying it themselves. Hey, we think it's unidentified. They're not even going far as saying it's strange or that it's weird, but they're properly saying it did come from us, and we do agree it is unidentified aerial phenomena. The released videos can be found at the Naval Air Systems Command FOIA reading room. And of course, I'll have a link to all this stuff down below. This is the FOIA reading room here. I've downloaded these copies as well and checked them out. They are exactly the same as the ones that were released by TTSA. So let's look at the first. And I'm kind of going to ramp them up because quite honestly, this is the one that I'm just really not all that impressed by. So the great thing about TTSA's coverage on this is, for the first minute of the video, they're actually explaining to you what's going on the screen, all these different indicators and all these different things. Like, what do they mean? Some of the key ones, this number up here is how many degrees to the right or to the left the object is. And this is kind of the targeting block here that is automatically capturing the object. So like in this example right now, it's saying it's about 4 degrees right. This number over here is how many degrees downward from the nose of the plane the object is. So here we're seeing that it's about 6 degrees down. Another key indicator here is they're actually showing that there is 2 different display modes, and as you watch these videos, you'll see the display kind of kick over from one mode to the other. Apparently, it's called the hot display designator, and they're saying it's in white mode. You can see a WHT, and I know this is a little grainy, but when we start playing it, it'll clean up a little bit. And that means that hot items are white. So right now, this is in white mode. We're looking at this item. It's showing up as white. It does have some blooming around it. I don't call that an aura. For me, that's camera bloom. And if this switches to black, then the hot item will show up as black. So let's just take a look at this one real quick. There's no audio on this one. And here it is playing. And it's just, I don't know. There's nothing to it. The speed is also showing up down here. They're going about 0.55 of a Mach, 200. It looks like about 250 miles per hour. So now they've switched to the other camera mode. It looks like on top of that, there was also some type of zoom that happened there where it zoomed in on the object. And Now they're in black mode, so the heat is showing up as black. A problem I'm having with this image is I don't know what that area is behind them. I don't know if this object is down across near the water somewhere. I don't know if there's clouds behind it. I have no idea. There's just not enough visual information for me to really look at this and try to understand what's going on here. All I'm seeing is, yeah, they've got this kind of white, messy thing that's in the middle of the screen. And if they switch over to the between the black and the white, they're just flipping the color on it. It's really tough. I mean, this could be anything in my mind. I could film something like this, like by zooming in on my carpet. Like I don't get it. Once again, the most interesting part of the video is right at the end where we get a shot on this object and it looks like it's kind of moving out of frame. You get about as close as they've been to the object. For some reason, the targeting actually drops the object, which I'm kind of wondering about as well. Seems strange to me that this, military device that's so good at targeting these objects all of a sudden decides it's just going to let that one go. I don't know if there's some condition where because they've zoomed in so much that like it's done an override on the camera and it's not going to let the camera move to continue tracking that object or something like that. But it's kind of strange to me that right when we're going to get something decent in terms of looking at this thing, the footage ends. It loses targeting and it ends. Now, this one is the one that I think is probably the most interesting. As opposed to that last one, here you can see there's definitely some clouds that are going on behind the object. Once again, the black or white hot display designator is down here, so keep that in mind. It looks like for white, it's showing that as a heat source. So that kind of makes sense. I also looked at some pictures of just what do jets look like through FLIR cameras, forward-looking infrared cameras. And they, jets basically kind of look the same. I don't know why the heat looks so even, but unless the camera is very close, it's not going to show a difference between like the jet stream and the actual jet. It's all just going to show up kind of in the same tone of white. But like I said, if you get the camera very close, it'll show the differences on like the wheels might be one temperature, the jet might be another, and the jet stream coming out the back might be a lot brighter than everything else. And in some instances, some of those cameras will totally bloom out. Like the jet stream will be so bright that you'll see it kind of create that aura and shade out some of the other information. But this one has audio, so I can't talk at the same time. Let's just watch it together once here.
Dude, there's a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing. It's rotating.
So this one to me, extremely interesting. There's a lot going on here visually. And once again, I'm thankful that they actually told us what these gauges all kind of mean, and that the pilot was interviewed about, I believe there was a pilot interviewed about this occurrence and he shared some information about it. In this instance, they actually turned towards the object and were flying towards it. And he said that they came in with about a half mile of it, I think, before it disappeared. But once again, we get to the end of this footage. We don't see what happens. We can verify if we look at the gauge information that's happening here that the degrees at the start of the video, it's 54 degrees to the left. And by the time we get to the end of the video, he's pretty much right in line with going towards it. One thing that kind of raises a big question for me is you have him moving towards it at, it looks like 242 miles per hour. And it's not really changing size. It doesn't seem to be growing at a significant rate, and it seems strange to me because you do have, you can see from the gauges at this point he's kind of heading directly towards it, going that fast, and it just, once again, where's the rest of this video? I mean, why not release the rest of this so we can see how this video ends? It could be like if this was some type of equipment malfunction or something, what if that thing just blinks out? Or if this is an actual object, the motion that it's taken up to this point, all of a sudden we have it kind of turn in a very interesting way. What's the next step? Does it go flying downwards? Does it go flying off to the left, flying up, flying off to the right? There's a lot that we could have learned from whatever the next few moments of this video are. And why is this video stopped at this point? I don't know. I really don't know. Especially considering the story of this video. Knowing that this wasn't really cleared for release. Essentially, these are leaks. So whoever had access to this video, you would think there's one of two things. Either this is the most interesting part of the video that they knew, hey, if we could get this out, we could get people talking and thinking about this. Or they knew that if they released more than this, just a few seconds more, that maybe it wouldn't grab the attention of the public and maybe it wouldn't be as valuable to them. So it's pretty interesting to me that we have what we consider kind of an unofficial leak of these videos, but then when the official ones get released, we effectively have the same copies. So like, why didn't the DoD say, hey, you know what? If there was a way to disprove that this is an actual object, like the DoD could have looked at this and said, hey, we watched the whole thing and we see that that's just some type of bizarre glitch in the camera system and it actually disappears within the next few seconds. Why don't we release that whole thing so that we can just kind of put the public at rest about this? But we don't have that happen either. On a personal note, I know a lot of people are extremely entertained by the way it sounds like there's a couple of surfers in the aircraft that are seeing this together. I keep thinking of like, what would it be like if you had Bill and Ted in an aircraft? But let's go ahead and watch the final one together. This is one that I had an initial assumption about. I'm going to save it until after to share with you guys. It's another one with audio, so I can't talk over it, but let's watch this.
Nickel 6-1 Tango, Roger, over. Oh, got it! Woohoo! Roger, there's troubleshooting. Did you box moving target? No, I took an auto track. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at it fly!
So when I first watched this one, I kind of had the assumption that the background was water, and I still don't know to this day what it is. It could be land. I'm really not seeing anything that I would consider trees. It looks, I don't know. I'm still kind of thinking it's water. My initial assumption when I watched this was they're somehow tracking some type of reflection. But there is a bit of a problem with that in terms of this video. If you check the indicator right now, it's in infrared mode, but it's set for black mode. So this object, if it is a heat source, should show up as solid black, and it's showing up as solid white. So it's kind of the opposite of what it should be. And these other two, it kind of made sense. The object that they were tracking was a heat source, and of course, if you track aircraft, it's combustion. There's going to be some heat source that's coming from that aircraft. This one is something completely different. This is something that is extremely cold as opposed to its surroundings, which honestly is the biggest mystery for me. I don't understand this one at all. In terms of it possibly being a reflection, I've been watching this over and over, and once they actually start tracking this object, if you keep an eye on the tracking of the degrees here from left to right and the degrees up and down, there's a little bit of movement, but not a ton of movement. And it seems to me that the object is going at the same speed as the camera that's tracking it. Now, I've seen some photos of these cameras. They appear to be front mounted, and I don't know what their range of motion is, but they don't look like they're, like 360 cameras. I don't think they have some type of swivel where they can look all the way around to the back of the plane. They might. I don't know. I'm just telling you guys based off the information I've seen. I'm not familiar enough with these to know if they truly have that capacity to swivel all the way around like that. But the way this thing locks on, first of all, I'm totally impressed by this targeting mechanism. I think it's really cool how it tracks that object once it locks onto it. But there's something about this where it seems like the plane is moving at the same speed as the object. And once again, that's making me think it's some type of reflection, or maybe a reflection of another aircraft that's flying along with them. So here is a picture of that camera, like I was talking about. And you guys kind of see my point. It's just, it looks like all of the array and the apparatus for them capturing these images is all built out on the front of that. It could be that there's a back end to it as well. But I'd be kind of surprised. I don't know. I don't know. There might be. But this is developed by Raytheon, and it is called the Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared, ATF-LIR. Once again, I assume because it says it's forward-looking that it probably can't rotate to the back, but I don't know that 100%. Raytheon's Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared Pod delivers pinpoint accuracy and reliability for air-to-air and air-to-ground mission support. Raytheon's Advanced Targeting FLIR assures mission success by integrated advanced EO and IR sensors with one of the most powerful lasers on the market. So I'm just curious, what is EO? Electro-optical sensors, and they are electronic detectors that convert light or a change in light into an electronic signal. They're used in many applications like lamps that turn on automatically in response to darkness, position sensors that activate when an object interrupts a light beam, flash detection to synchronize one photographic flash with another, and photoelectric sensors that detect the distance, absence, or presence of an object. So it would seem to me that that's probably a pretty key feature in terms of the targeting mechanism. They might be using it combined with that laser to actually lock on to the objects, but then of course, they are also using IR sensors, which is infrared. I'm sure that you guys are familiar enough with that, but an infrared sensor is an electronic device that measures and detects infrared radiation in its surrounding environment. IR is invisible to the human eye. Anything that emits heat gives off infrared radiation. And once again, that's just such an important thing. IR is invisible to the human eye. So what we're seeing here is a visual depiction. Basically, there's like programming behind this that's saying, you know, we're picking up that there's a heat signature here, so show a block of black on their screen so that they know where the heat signature is. ATF-LIR can locate and designate targets day or night at ranges exceeding 40 nautical miles and altitudes surpassing 50,000 feet. So just sounds like amazing technology, and it makes you wonder when they're using kind of different aspects like this, like they might be using a laser for trying to determine the distance of the target, and they're using that combined with a sensor to try to see where that laser is hitting, and then they're using a different camera to try to detect the heat of that object, and then they have a program that's translating all that information into a visual display for these pilots. Can anything go wrong in the middle of all that? Could there be some type of technical hiccup that's making these items show up on the screen? Which is another interesting thing. I'd be very curious for these pilots to talk about, did you see this? I mean, one of them says he got within half a mile of it. Did you lay eyes on this item? So just kind of combining my initial assumption, at least about one of the videos, I was wondering, can thermal imaging have a reflection? Can you get a reflection off of that? And interestingly, now I don't know if this really applies to that video necessarily, because it seems like it's detecting a severely cold spot in the reflection. But if thermal imaging can reflect, so everything else is reflecting heat, like let's say the sun was on one side and you have the plane in the middle, the sun rays are bouncing off the water and that's detecting heat or creating heat to be detected, but the shadow of their actual plane is blocking the sun rays. Could that be the cold spot that they're actually tracking? I found this great article over at firehouse.com. Firefighters use this technology as well. And can you have reflections of thermal imaging? Indeed, you can. In the overwhelming majority of thermal imagery users, what you see is what you get, which is called WYSIWYG. However, in certain situations, WYSIWYG is far from the truth and can be misleading and dangerous. Thermal energy is easily reflected by many different types of surfaces: a mirror, the side of a fire engine, a dry erase board, ceramic tile, stainless steel appliances, glass. These all have the potential to create thermal reflections. When we look at a window, for instance, with our eyes, we can see straight through it. With a thermal imager, it's the same as looking at a mirror. They even talk about a situation as a firefighter that if you're using one of these sensors, you might go into a home, see a big fire, looks like it's in front of you. You turn on the water, you're blasting at this thing, you turn off the water, and the fire is still the same size. You haven't affected it at all. And maybe you were actually shooting at the reflection of the fire in a sliding glass door. So that's the type of very serious things that can happen with firefighters using this type of equipment, where they can have a bad reading that effectively makes it look like something is somewhere where it actually isn't. False impressions can arise when dealing with reflections. These can be as simple as mistaking the location of something seen on the thermal imager, or as complicated as attempting to suppress a fire that does not exist. So honestly, for me, number one theory on this particular video, they're filming the ocean. I think they're getting a thermal reflection from the water from the sun. And I think that spot that they've locked onto, I think it's their own shadow. That's just their thermal shadow, effectively. That's kind of what I believe. Does that hold up for this first one? Possibly. I can't tell you, because there's just the quality of this one is so terrible, I have no idea. But if we had that happen in one situation, could it happen in another? I would think so. For this one, I'm really unsure. It doesn't quite seem like it. I don't think that we're looking at the ocean at this point. We've got, the degrees here. We can see that they're only pitching down 2 degrees for whatever they're looking at. So I'm not certain what's happening with this one. However, if moisture is acting as a reflective surface, does that happen in the atmosphere as well, around clouds? I do think that they're around a lot of cloud cover here. Possibly. FLIR.com has a whole article that goes into kind of how the camera decides to point out an object at a particular heat, and that there's a little bit of a variance in terms of that heat being reflected accurately back to the camera. There's a couple of considerations, like if the camera actually is warming up itself, that could throw off some of the temperatures that are being reported. Reflected ambient temperature, atmosphere temperature. Also notes here that longer ranges will introduce uncertainty in the measurement because of the atmospheric absorption and, to a lesser extent, its emission. So this thing gets, you can see this thing gets really kind of nerdy in terms of trying to understand the equations that they're using to display something as being a heat source here, and the different things that can affect it, all the way from back in the laboratory when it was initially calibrated. So is it possible that we're looking at some type of technical glitch or something that's happening here? I don't know. The only main thing that really bothers me with this one is, like I said, the size not changing. Just go outside and walk and look to your right at an object, and then kind of change yourself so that you're walking directly at the object. There should be some motion that we're seeing around this. And I don't know if we're seeing enough. I just don't know enough about the distances that are being traveled here, the speeds that are being traveled here. But I'm pretty sure with the information that's provided here, someone that's really good at physics and math might be able to make a strong determination about the size of the object. Really hope someone might do that someday. Might help us all understand this a little bit better. Okay, so just a couple of other things. I'm going to have these in the description box below. I think this video is already going long enough, but theintercept.com did a really good article kind of looking at Luis Elizondo and looking at the projects that have kicked out from their company. And Keith Clorer kind of tries to tie together. It's almost like he's doing an analysis of the initial media campaign that spun up around this, and how are some of these people connected? Were some of these people even invested in this company that were also reporting on it? Really interesting read, especially if you want to kind of learn more about the man behind these videos. Theconversation.com also has another great article. I really love the title of this. The U.S. military has officially published 3 UFO videos. Why doesn't anybody seem to care? It's really interesting because for as much as these videos seem to offer, it really does seem like the public just keeps kind of getting a little whirlwind of, oh yeah, what's that about? Yeah, forget it. It's really, really strange. What about the man himself? What does Donald Trump think about this? I just wonder if it's real, Trump said of the videos. That's a hell of a video. They officially released them this week in order to clear up any misconceptions by the public on whether or not the footage that has been circulating was real or whether or not there is more to the videos, according to Pentagon spokesperson Sue Go. In 2017, one of the pilots who saw one of the unidentified objects in 2004 told CNN that it moved in ways he couldn't explain. As I got close to it, it rapidly accelerated to the south and disappeared in less than 2 seconds, said retired U.S. Navy pilot David Fravor. Very, very interesting, and I just wonder why we don't see that in the footage. Last year, the president said he had a meeting on the subject. I did have one very brief meeting on it, he said in the interview, but people are saying they're seeing UFOs. Do I believe it? Not particularly. So that is directly from the mouth of the president. Now, I had a theory when I was talking to Tim and Lance and Morph about this, about why it has been officially released at this time in particular. And I think it might be helping to just kind of push the agenda in a general way of the United States Space Force. I think they just want to make sure that the public is aware, hey, there might be some stuff out there that we can identify. Maybe we need to put some things in place to be able to handle things like that. Let's learn really quickly before we end today's video about the Space Force. The United States Space Force is the Space Warfare Service branch of the United States Armed Forces and is one of the 8 U.S. uniformed services, the 6th and youngest branch of the U.S. Armed Forces. It was the first branch of the military established since the formation of the independent U.S. Air Force in 1947. The U.S. Space Force established an independent branch of the U.S. Armed Forces on the 20th of December, 2019. There was kind of a precursor to that called the Air Force Space Command, which has kind of been rolled into it. But we're talking over 16,000 employees, I believe, at this time that are part of the U.S. Space Force. The U.S. Space Force's mission is to organize, train, and equip space forces in order to protect U.S. and allied interests in space and to provide space capabilities to the joint force. Its responsibilities include developing military space professionals, acquiring military space systems, maturing the military doctrine for space power, and organizing space forces to present to the combatant commands. One thing I always wonder about this, I really believe that Elon Musk wants to be the internet provider for space, and I'm now kind of wondering if Donald Trump wants to get into the real estate game for space. At some point, there is some person or family that's going to make an insane amount of money once we start figuring out how to sell sections of space. Functions, as described in the United States Space Force Act, it will be organized, trained, and equipped to provide freedom of operation for the United States in, from, and to space, provide prompt and sustained space operations. Its duties include to protect the interests of the United States in space, deter aggression in, from, and to space. Deter aggression from space. I guess you could read that a few different ways, but I don't know. Do you think that UFOs are completely off the table in how that's worded? And conduct space operations. Of course, you might have heard there was a little bit of controversy around their logo because it looks a lot like the Starfleet Command logo. For any Star Trek fans out there, I think it's pretty interesting. It does look like a pretty close match. But I don't know, Brain Scratchers. This is one of those things that I really want some definitive proof. I would love for this footage to have been released in longer formats. I would love for us to have the whole context of the conversations of the pilots, because I'm always watching out for clever editing. These things were released almost in a YouTube kind of it's almost an older YouTube style. You know, the old rules of YouTube were keep the video under 3 minutes and all this. They didn't release these as one video that was 10 minutes long. They broke it down to 3 separate videos. I think all of them. The first one's 245. The second one's 153. The second one's 204. It just really seemed like these were packaged as, we want our investors to think there's something to this, put this out in this particular way. And it's so strange to me that when the DoD came back and said, okay, we're going to release it, that they didn't release just more. I mean, just 2 minutes more on either side of these occurrences could completely wipe out all this talk about it being some type of true unidentified flying object, or it could have supported it even better. It could have really gone both ways. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let's talk about that in the comments down below. And before we end today's video, I just want to share a picture with you from a infrared camera. And I do believe that this is an alien whose skin is made out of fire. I hope you enjoyed this fringy, old school episode of BrainScratch. As a matter of fact, I'm going to kick on the old BrainScratch logo shirts for a little while over at the Lord and Art store. If you want to grab one for yourself, head over there before they're gone again. I would also like to thank Stephanie Lowe, Nicole King, and No Info Given, who are new patrons. No info given. Do you work for the government? Also, Stephanie Lowe increased her pledge after she joined Patreon, so I really appreciate that. If you'd like to do the same, head over to www.lordandarts.com, where you can sign up for PayPal, sign up for Patreon, or buy an old school BrainScratch shirt if you get there soon enough. All of it helps keep me here doing what I love doing, spending time with you guys, and chasing aliens with former guitarist from Blink-182. Take care, everyone. If you're not doing anything tomorrow, Saturday night, please come back to the channel. We have a very special true crime game time. We have Kendall Ray and her husband Josh, the Mile Higher podcast, will be here. Danielle Hallen, my partner in Crime After Crime, she's coming back to play again. And Paul Holes and Billy Jensen. It is literally true crime superstars tomorrow night on True Crime Game Time. I hope that you will come and check it out. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll see you back here on Monday with a brand new episode of Case Cracked on the Lord and Arts channel.